Disgraced music mogul Sean Diddy Combs, once known for his lavish lifestyle and living large in his multi-million-dollar mansions, has a new home as he awaits trial in his federal sex trafficking case. Last week, the Bad Boy Founder's defense team unsuccessfully fought to keep the music producer out of federal jail after his arrest. Now his new digs once house other high-profile inmates, including R. Kelly, Fetty Wap, Sam Bankman-Fried, and Ghislaine Maxwell. Diddy is currently housed at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, New York, a stark difference from the glitz, glamour, and wealth in Hollywood and Star Island in Miami Beach, Florida. But MDC Brooklyn has been described as hell on earth, with horrifying conditions. The facility, which now houses Diddy, opened in the early 90s and is the only federal jail in New York City after the Bureau of Prisons closed its Metropolitan Correctional Center in 2021 after many issues came to light in the wake of Jeffrey Epstein's suicide just 2 years earlier. MDC Brooklyn, which houses about 1,200 detainees with conditions reportedly so terrible some judges have refused to send people there, is mainly used for post-arrest detention for people awaiting trial in federal courts in Manhattan or Brooklyn. According to the Associated Press, detainees have complained about rampant violence, severe staffing shortages, and widespread drug and contraband smuggling, some of which is even facilitated by employees. This past June, a detainee was stabbed to death at the jail. In July, another inmate died after he was hurt in a brawl, and at least 4 people have died by suicide in the last 3 years. Diddy's attorney argued in legal paperwork MDC Brooklyn is not fit for pretrial detention, citing detainee deaths and other concerns. His attorney, Mark Agnifilo, asked the judge for Diddy to be moved to a New Jersey jail, but the judge says it's up to the Bureau of Prisons to decide. And while Diddy is being housed in a special housing unit, also known as the SHU, officials say he's not receiving any special treatment, but are closely monitoring him as he's been placed on procedural suicide watch in case the disgraced producer attempts to harm himself. But his attorney says his client is not at all suicidal, saying the mogul is strong, healthy, confident, and focused on his defense. Prior to his arrest, Diddy was known for his businesses, and I'm sure some of our viewers watching this are business owners or maybe even interested in starting their own business. That's why I want to take a quick moment to thank one of our amazing sponsors, and that's Odoo. Odoo is a free all-in-one business management software that provides you with a range of applications that helps with the day-to-day of owning a business. And there's a lot of moving parts even here at Law&Crime that Odoo can actually come in handy for. Our office manager can use Odoo to manage PTO and new hire information. Our sales manager can use Odoo's customer relations platform. I can even use it to manage our mini subscriptions. And guess what? You can try Odoo now for free without even entering your credit card. You can even get free lifetime access to one of the apps in the Odoo suites if you don't need the rest. So click our link odoo.com/LCnews in the description and pin comments and try Odoo now for free. So what does Diddy's foreseeable time behind bars look like? He reportedly only gets 1 hour daily of recreation and 3 showers a week. He served breakfast, lunch, and dinner that is delivered to his cell. But instead of extravagant meals he was once accustomed to, he can expect foods like egg noodles, cereal, chili, peas, and if needed, there are reportedly vegetarian options as well. But if those foods don't work, MDC Brooklyn's commissary list has a list of additional foods and snack items, including a 6-pack of Hershey bars for $7.05, peanut butter for a little more than $3, stuffed chicken with rice for $5.75, plus more options. Diddy was once a staple at New York's biggest fashion event of the year, the Met Gala, and a frequenter of fashion weeks across the globe. Now will be forced to wear clothes not from haute couture, but instead a switch up to essentially sweats. For extra clothes, he can purchase a sweatshirt for a little more than $16, New Balance sneakers for about $55, boxer briefs for a little more than $6, plus a bath towel and washcloth set for about $12. And while confined to a cell for 23 hours a day, which is a huge difference from throwing now infamous parties, to pass the time, Diddy can purchase an MP3 player for a little under $90. But according to reports, he has a spending limit of $160, a huge downgrade from the millions he was seemingly spending prior to his arrest. The once self-proclaimed bad boy will have to get comfortable with his new home after a federal judge denied his request for a $50 million bail after pleading not guilty to federal charges including racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking. Well, this is an excellent time now to bring on prison consultant Justin Paperny. Justin, thanks for being here. As you know, Diddy was kept behind bars after his arrest this week, and a judge denied him bail. In your opinion, how do you think he's adjusting to life in a federal detention center right now?
If Sean Combs is focusing on things he cannot control, he will have a miserable experience. When he can call home, when he can visit, the living conditions, exercising maybe an hour a day, showering a few hours a week, if he fixates on that, it is going to be miserable. And every day will feel like a year. On the other hand, if he can learn from those who have come before him and master the experience, my business partner served 26 consecutive years for a nonviolent crime, including 8 years in the penitentiary. He never complained. He focused on his family, trying to prove worthy of the love and support of his family. If he can do that, the experience, it won't be easy. I'm not insane. It will be more bearable. The choice is up to him.
And as far as we know right now, he has been kept in solitary confinement or the shoe right now, and he's been on suicide watch. How different is that experience from being in the general population?
It's much harder. If you like to be around people, you like communication, if you're an extrovert, and then suddenly you were isolated 23 hours a day on total lockdown, I'm not spinning that it's difficult. It will test the strongest mind. But he has to understand others have gone through it and emerged successfully. And what he and his lawyers have to understand is they have like a messaging problem. They continue to say things that do not get them closer to what they want, which is bond. It's led to indictments. And if he can begin to introspect and kind of reverse engineer some of his choices and recognize it is my decisions alone that have led me here. And if I can communicate differently moving forward, maybe the ultimate sentence, even if convicted, could be better, perhaps could lead to bond eventually. But it can be very difficult in segregation. And his lawyers have to stop blaming and excusing and talking about how difficult the experience is. Because here's what a judge is going to say: if you were so concerned about what these filthy living conditions would be like in a detention center, if you were so concerned about your safety, you wouldn't have obstructed justice. You would not have, according to the government, created victims over a sustained period of time. Until he changes his message, more problems are going to follow.
And Diddy allegedly has been accused of using different drugs in the past. Even prosecutors have said on the night he was arrested that there was allegedly pink cocaine in his hotel room. Do you think that there's any chance he could be going through withdrawals during his adjustment behind bars right now?
There's no question. People who know they're going to prison who have been on medications, either illegal, it would be wise to understand the Bureau of Prisons might not prescribe you what you like. And if you're taking illegal drugs, unless you're engaging in the prison hustle, you're not going to get it. It would be easier to get the drugs and engage in the prison hustle in general population, but not when you're on lockdown for 23 hours a day. So certainly it is a brutal adjustment if you are on no drugs, but certainly if you are withdrawing, isolated 23 hours a day without getting things that you can get the snap of a finger, it makes the decision or the process that much harder, which is why I can assure you, based on what happened with Epstein, the high profile nature of the failures of this prison in the past, including some judges not even sending prisoners there because they were so concerned about their safety, you can expect staff is watching him, not 22, 23, 24 hours a day. They do not want more problems.
And this is a man going from private chefs and food from across the world to a set menu, just like any other detainee or inmate. What can you tell us about the food and the commissary in a place like the Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn?
It's a difference. That much I can that much I can tell you. You're going to have a lot of starchy food, cereals. If you get any vegetables at all, they're old, so to speak. They are not fresh. Same fruits and vegetables, no good. A lot of processed food, some rice and beans and muffins and things that generally most people don't like to eat. It's not terribly healthy. And again, the government would say that is a consequence of this process. So certainly it is an adjustment. Most people will lose weight. And it's hard because he can't even really exercise in this environment. There's no outdoor, like I've said before, it's not one of these camps where you can walk around a track. Even in a high security penitentiary like Atlanta, there's going to be a track and outdoors. When you're in a detention center, locked down 23 hours a day, not eating healthy foods or getting your medications, it could test even the strongest person. And again, that's what I would say to him. Your family is watching. There are people, so many are critical of him, I understand, but there are also those that love and support him who are watching. So, as crazy as it sounds to some, and I've been called crazy, it's an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, to express to his family others have gone through misery and struggle. They have emerged strong with dignity, with a plan. And as I said earlier, once he embraces a better message that it's not about him and how miserable his living situation is, but rather people he might have hurt, that's when he can get on the right side and get towards eventually getting out of there and also a shorter sentence with better messaging.
And his lawyers did fight unsuccessfully this week to get him out on that bail package. Do you think, in his mind, him being Diddy, that he really just didn't believe he would end up in jail where he has to remain now until trial?
There's no question. He presumed because it would be very difficult for someone like to be a flight risk. Okay. So you figure I'm selling the jet. Here are the keys to the jet. Here's the collateral to my $50 million mansion in Florida. I am flying to New York on my own accord. I will turn myself in. So you rationalize or convince yourself I'm so high profile in public and I'm going there on my own. They're not going to take me in. But we know the government likes to make examples out of people. And the government's doing a good job here. They're focusing what too many people tend to forget about: the victims. So while it's difficult for Diddy, I know, to be confined in a cell for 23 hours a day, it might not be as hard as the victims they allege he created. Let's focus on them. Let's put them first. And if he can begin to do that, he's going to get more of what he wants: freedom and potentially bond. But certainly, if I were a betting person, I would have bet that he was going to walk out of there into his mansion on 24 hours a day lockdown, even with security guards outside the house. He's not going anywhere, but at least he's in the mansion.
And going from mega millions of dollars, a huge mansions, private jet, to a jail cell that's reportedly plagued with issues at the detention center, which is not uncommon for a lot of jails and prisons across the United States. But do you believe that his life could be in danger if he's ever released into the general population?
I don't think, at least for quite some time, if convicted, that he'll be released to the general population. There are prisoners who like headlines, who loathe sex offenders, who might loathe him as a celebrity. The Bureau of Prisons cannot have any problems at this time. So if he's ever in general population, it will be quite some time. By then, we'll have forgotten about this case. As we love stardom, eventually we're going to forget about this case and move on to something else. It will be quite some time. And that's a consequence of his celebrity. Rather than being around people and communicating and being in that general population, he is totally isolated, which can really test his resolve. I have no doubt his family, his friends, those who love and support him, are worried about him. And I encourage him to respond as best as he properly can. But he has a difficult road ahead of him.
And someone who is worth hundreds of millions, even a reported $1 billion before, do you think it'll present any type of problem that he could end up getting any type of special treatment?
Certainly, there could be staff who admire him, sycophants who want to kiss up to him in predictable fashion because he's a celebrity. There will be some prisoners totally enamored by him. Some won't care. So you could expect at some point prisoners could offer, it could be drugs. We see iPhones that are very pervasive inside of these prisons. It's been a huge problem for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So it's also going to ensure that he doesn't. Oscar Wilde said he could resist anything but temptation. If there's temptation presented to him and he gives in, what does that do? It could exacerbate his struggles because the government can say he can't even control himself in a lockdown environment. That's why he's not free, Your Honor. So temptations eventually will make its way to him, potentially from staff and prisoners. And if he cares most about his family and getting the best outcome possible, it's going to require him to say, no, thank you. As much as I would love this drug or this iPhone or something that is inappropriate inside of this prison, my highest value is my freedom. No, thank you. And it's not always easy to do when you are used to getting everything you want for so long and then suddenly you are without. It requires discipline.
And like I had mentioned before, I'm sure Diddy and his defense attorney were both left stunned, knowing that he'll now have to prepare for his trial behind bars as he wasn't given bail. What can you tell us about a high profile celebrity like Diddy now having to prep for trial in a federal detention center?
I think it was the philosopher George Santayana that said, those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. So we have these high profile celebrities: Elizabeth Holmes, Sam Bankman Fried, Robert Menendez, who was convicted at trial, tried to blame the conviction or the conduct on his sick wife. So we have those who have come before us who continue to go down this path of blaming and excusing, never identifying with victims, or at least acknowledging they could have done anything wrong. And I would say, if that's what you want to do, cool. Own it and understand the consequences that follow. So there are probably enablers, lawyers, friends, and family telling him what he wants to hear at great expense. Though if convicted, he's the one that has to serve that lengthy federal prison sentence. He's the one that will endure that pain and regret of not having made better decisions, including decisions he could make right now. What does accepting responsibility look like? Are there things within the government's version of events that I can identify with, that I can acknowledge happened? The more he can say, maybe I did this, but I didn't do that, then he can get, as I say, on the right path of accepting some sense of responsibility. But in our experience, those who have the resources, the means, who have convinced themselves, if anything, they are the victim, they go to trial. Unfortunately, for those people, most lose. They're convicted in about they're convicted. They would be convicted already by the time most people go to trial. So of course he's got the right to go to trial. We would remind him, understand the consequences that follow, decades longer in prison, because the government cares about what? Victims, and we're not talking enough about them.
And I think it's been kind of told and said in the past that a lot of people seem to believe in some way that federal detention centers are a step above, state prisons or jails or anything like that. What are your thoughts on that statement? Do you think that, again, this is a center that's been plagued with just horrific conditions reportedly? What are your thoughts on kind of that comparison from a federal detention center to a state level type of jail?
The only thing better than a detention center, or the only thing worse, I would say, is being in transit. So someone in our community right now is going through transit in Victorville in Oklahoma. You're in shackles and chains 24 hours a day. You can get picked up at any time, and you can be there for weeks, in some cases months. When people in our community go from a detention center or transit to a minimum security camp, although even a medium, one said to me, I feel like I've gone to Disneyland. I feel like I have made it. And they're in a low security prison because they've endured transit for so long and the detention center. This is no doubt the hardest part of the journey, not only because he's in detention, locked down 23 hours a day, because he's in the land of the unknown, of limbo, of waiting and wondering what's going to come. A number of those people in that detention center have already been convicted. So at least you have clarity. There is value the day that you get sentenced to prison. And I know, because I was sentenced to prison, at least you know you have a beginning and an end. So not only is he enduring a miserable experience that he can overcome with a strong mind, but he's also wondering, how long could this potentially be? So it's a double whammy. But there's nothing harder than transit or time in a detention center.
And since you're with White Collar Advice, any advice you would share with the mogul right now?
The people have endured worse, that he should learn from those through our history who have emerged strong through dignity. I mentioned my partner, Michael Santos, did 26 years in prison for a nonviolent drug crime. He served 8 years in the penitentiary. He educated himself. He mentored tens of thousands of people. He creates programs that influences millions of people in federal prison. I served 1 measly year in prison, yet the lessons we teach at White Collar stem from Michael's 26 years through prison. So he needs to learn from people like Michael, people who have endured struggle, never complain, prove worthy of the love and support of their family, identify with victims, because they may be free, but in their own mind, they're suffering more than he may be in that 23-hour lockdown. In sum, learn from those who have mastered the experience and don't complain. People have had it worse and not had the privilege that he had taken for granted for so long.
All right. Well, excellent analysis there, Justin. I really appreciate your time. Before we sign you off, anything else you'd like to add?
He needs to prove worthy of the love and support of his family, and he needs to embrace better messaging and put himself in the shoes of a prosecutor, a judge, a probation officer, and understand what is their perception of him. It's not that he's rich and a mogul, been an entrepreneur for a long time. They're not looking at the totality of his life right now. They're looking at the alleged conduct. What can he do through his own efforts, day by day by day, to demonstrate he is different than the government's version of events? Until he does that, I don't care what his lawyer says. I don't care how much complaining comes out of his lawyer's mouth. Until he does that, until he begins to try to change the government's version of events, more struggle is coming and a longer prison sentence.
All right, Justin Paperny, thank you again so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And at this time, Sean Combs, aka Diddy, will remain in the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. His next scheduled court date is slated for October 9th. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.